U.S. sanctions Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel in latest move to pressure island's leadership. Add AP News as your preferred source to see more of our stories on Google. Add AP News on Google. Add AP News as your preferred source to see more of our stories on Google. Share Washington app. The United States imposed sanctions Thursday on Cuban President Miguel Diaz-Canel, his wife, and 3 other individuals in the latest move by the Trump administration to pressure the island's leadership that drew immediate condemnation from Havana. Included in the sanctions are Alejandro Castro Espín, the sole son of former Cuban President Raúl Castro and Vilma Espín. He served as an advisor to Cuba's Defense and National Security Commission and was present when Raúl Castro greeted then-U.S. President Barack Obama in Havana during a historic March 2016 meeting. Castro Espín's son, Raúl Alejandro Castro Calis, also was listed. The new penalties come as U.S. President Donald Trump has been threatening military action in Cuba since ousting Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro in January and then ordering an energy blockade that choked off fuel shipments to Cuba. That has led to severe blackouts, food shortages, and an economic collapse across the island. The threats took on additional weight after the U.S. announced criminal charges against Raúl Castro last month. Thursday's penalties, which follow Trump signing an executive order expanding sanctions against the island, freeze individuals' property and bank accounts in the U.S. But it's unclear how intertwined their finances are with the U.S. financial system. It's pretty unlikely Cuba's president and others have assets in the U.S., said Richard Feinberg, former U.S. National Security Advisor on Latin America and Professor Emeritus of International Political Economy at the University of California, San Diego. Read more. He said the sanctions could be seen as preliminary to an intervention or increasing pressure on the regime to cut a deal, adding that the rhetoric of Trump and U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio could take you in either direction. Diaz-Canel accused Trump of making new threatening statements against Cuba and said these measures are aimed at reinforcing the blockade and escalating the conflict between Cuba and the United States. This political blindness adds to the coercive measures applied in recent weeks against our country, designed to harm the Cuban people, he wrote on X. The aggression and perversion of the U.S. government will clash with our resolve to confront the worst-case scenarios and resist the imperial onslaught. Trump says about Cuba, "We're going to handle that." Asked Thursday if his sanctions were meant to accelerate Cuba's collapse, Trump said, "We just want them to be a nicely run country. The country is starving, and it's got no energy, it's got no oil, it's got no money, it's got nothing. It's got a beautiful piece of land. You could have beautiful resorts," Trump told reporters at an unrelated event in the Oval Office. Asked whether Cuba is close to collapsing, he said it's sort of collapsed and added that we are going to handle that as soon as we've finished military operations in Iran. "I like to do one thing at a time," Trump said. Trump has ratcheted up talk of regime change in Cuba after pledging to conduct a friendly takeover of the country if its leadership did not open its economy to American investment and kick out U.S. adversaries. Rubio, the son of Cuban immigrants who has long taken a hard line against Cuba's socialist leadership, has said Trump's preference is to reach a deal, but has said he is doubtful the U.S. can find a diplomatic resolution with the current government. Those designated to direct or fund the regime and its efforts to mobilize its radical revolutionary movements in the United States and around the world, Rubio said in a statement. Rubio has defended the Trump administration's decision to slap escalating sanctions on Havana, the largest of which is against Grupo de Administración Empresarial S.A., a business conglomerate operated by the Cuban Revolutionary Armed Forces. Cuba's top diplomat condemns new sanctions as creating a scenario of conflict. In addition to Diaz-Canel, Bruno Rodriguez, Cuba's Minister of Foreign Affairs, said the vile inclusion of Diaz-Canel and others, including Cuban institutions and civil society organizations, is the latest example of the U.S. interventionist plan to portray Cuba as a threat to U.S. national security. Every U.S. action aimed at creating a scenario of conflict between the two countries is destined to fail, he wrote on X. Every threat against Cuba's independence and sovereignty will be met with even greater unity and determination from our people. The new sanctions, which freeze any assets that those targeted may have in U.S. jurisdictions or any that come into U.S. jurisdictions, also apply to non-American entities that might do business with them. In addition to the individuals, the sanctions also target Cuba's defense ministry, its Institute for the Friendship with the Peoples, which promotes people-to-people talks, Mr. Cuba, an arm of the institute that oversees specialized tourism on the island, and the Committees for the Defense of the Revolution. Cuba's president, Castro relatives, and others are on the list. Diaz-Canel was handpicked in 2018 to succeed Raúl Castro and was the first person in decades to lead Cuba without bearing the name Castro. Under him, the island plunged into the worst economic and energy crisis in recent history, a situation worsened by heightened sanctions imposed by the Trump administration. Diaz-Canel's wife, Liz Peraza, also appeared on the sanctions list. She does not hold the title of First Lady, a title abolished during the revolution, but in practice she acts as such, receiving other spouses such as Queen Letizia of Spain and accompanying her husband on official trips. Her son Miguel Díaz-Canel, who is Diaz-Canel's stepson, also faces sanctions. Liz Peraza wrote on X late Thursday that it is almost an honor to be on this list. They never tire of ridicule and political stupidity. The new action boosts pressure on the Cuban government, but is far from the first time the U.S. has imposed sanctions against heads of state or government and their relatives. The U.S. hit former Sudanese President Omar Bashir and former Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe in the early 2000s and, more recently, targeted Maduro and his wife with sanctions. Cotto reported from San Juan, Puerto Rico. AP writer Andrea Rodriguez in Havana contributed to this report. Follow AP's coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean at https://news.com/hub/Latin America